Animating in Messiah is quite simple. Click into the Animate tab, then just grab an axis and move it in 3D space. Go down to the bottom timeline, grab the yellow marker, move it to a new frame number, and move it in 3D space again. Go down to the yellow marker, move it to a new frame, and move it in three-dimensional space again. When you want to see the timing of your keyframes, click on the play icon down at the bottom. The bar with the tick marks is called the dope master. Anything underneath the highlighted cells can be adjusted and moved around. This includes multiple objects or keyframe groups. If we move this bar up, we get our graph editor. We can choose to scale the graph to the range, or we can scale the graph to fit the view. To retime, you can simply grab the active cell in the dope master and move it along the timeline. You can also highlight the different keys, adjust their values in the graph editor, or right-click to move them along the timeline as well. There's a block called the Spline Block that lets you adjust the tension, bias, and continuity of the curve, whose default is set to TCB. Tension will flatten off the curve so we have an ease in, ease out. So it speeds up and then slows down before hitting its keyframe. Setting the tension to 0 results in a default spline. Adjusting bias will tilt the spline towards the next keyframe or the previous keyframe. Typically you get good results setting everything to 0. What if you want to keyframe multiple objects at once? Well, that's fairly easy. Highlight one of the objects, then hold down the Shift key and select the rest of them with the middle mouse click. Tap the Enter key to bring up the Create key dialog. Highlight selected items and click OK. Now all items you have selected have a keyframe on them. What if you want to move multiple objects at once? Well, use the Multi-Edit button. It's down here at the bottom right under the E key. Press the E key on your keyboard to turn it on and off. When it's on, you can move all of the objects at one time. You can even position them one time. When it's off, you can still keyframe your objects, but you can only edit one at a time. So what if you have a set of objects that need to be keyframed every time? Well, this is where Keyframe Groups come in. Go to Setup tab, click over into the Groups tab, and we'll create a keyframeable group for a specific set of objects. Highlight Procedural 1 and 2, click on the plus button, and we'll create the first group, Group 1. You can see that they've changed slightly in color. When you deselect them in the scene, they've been assigned a color in the list. Procedural 3 and 4, get a Group 2. Click on the plus button to create another group. Name this one Group 2. Procedural 3 and 4 have been assigned a different color. So when we click back into the Animate tab and need to keyframe, just tap the Enter key and you'll have a new option called Group. There's a pull-down menu here. You can highlight Group 1 or Group 2 to add your keyframes to. In this case it's Group 2. And click OK. What if we need to adjust keyframes on multiple objects? For example, all 4 of these spheres animated in unison. This is where the Dope Master comes in handy. The highlighted cell shows the current keyframe on the object that's selected. If we highlight many of these objects, the graph shows up, as well as keyframes inside the DM. By shift selecting many objects, we are able to edit all of those selected objects that are on that specific keyframe. If we toggle into the dope sheet, which is this icon on the left, we get a cell view of each keyframe and its current channel. So you can see as we move them around, we're moving around the channels for everything. By pressing play, we can retime the animation for the entire character. There are many other options to the dope sheet. Just by clicking on selected channels, you can change it to all items, which in this case is everything inside the scene, the current item, which is just Procedural 2, Procedural 2 and its descendants, which it doesn't have any right now, the hierarchy, if it were inside a hierarchy like a body, or the group that it belongs to, which in this case is Group 1. If we highlight Procedural 4, you can see that 3 and 4 pop up in Group 2 as we highlight the members of the group. So you can retime several different groups to different timings. You know, the first group remains the same. So how about deleting keyframes from many objects at one time? Highlight the object in the graph editor, then tap the Delete key to bring up the Delete key dialog. Right now it's set to Group. since this object belongs to group 2. Click OK, it will delete the keyframe from both objects located within the group. If you need to delete a range of objects, hold down the Shift key when you tap the Delete key to bring up the Delete Range box. It's still set to the same group, but make sure your endpoint is set to 1 or greater. Click OK. It'll ask you if you want to delete the key range. Click Yes. Now there are no keyframes on that group at all. If you need to remove keyframes from an entire scene, hold down the Shift key, tap the Delete key, and select all objects. Make sure your endpoint is set to 1 or greater, and click OK. Now everything has had its keyframes removed from them.